The rise of China. No, rise of China problem nahi hai. Rise of China accompanied by the Chinese belligerence and Chinese aggression. Two very powerful words. हमें किसी country के growth से थोड़ी problem है. हमें problem है country के aggression से, country के belligerence, total disdain of the global rules and regulations and global norms. We are scared about that. और इसका history रहा है. We have seen how belligerence of Germany, what it cost us. The belligerence of some local warlords, what it costs us. The article I'm discussing today is the article by Harsh Pant. Article by Harsh Pant, 26th September, The Hindu. And you should know about this gentleman, Harsh Pant. He's a scholar, the Vice President for Studies at the Observer Research Foundation, ORF. And plus, he has been the professor at the King's College, London. Essentially, he is a political scientist. The article's name is A Ground Plan for India's Reformed Multilateralism. A ground plan for India's reformed multilateralism. Now, this article is about two things. One is, it's about India should have a new approach, what we have called as the multilateral approach, engaging all the stakeholders, engaging all countries. There is an element of dialogue we have talked about. Plus, a very important agenda talking about is the UN reforms. UN reforms has been an important issue. इसमें मेंस में क्वेश्चंस आए हुए हैं और वैसे भी आपको पता होना चाहिए व्हाट आर द यूएन रिफॉर्म्स रिक्वायर्ड. नाउ इस आर्टिकल्स में चाहूंगा कि आप कन्वर्सेशन के बाद में यू शुड गो बैक टू योर रूम ऑल ऑफ यू एंड रीड दिस आर्टिकल लाइन बाय लाइन अगेन. द वोकैबुलरी, द टर्म्स यूज्ड, I think they are a good source of your answer writing eventually. What I have done is, I have segregated the article under three broad heads. We have what is the agenda, what is the suggestion, what are the objectives we seek to achieve, और ये agenda suggestion का basis क्या है? Basis क्या है? इसका background क्या है? The agenda we're talking about is the UN reforms. The UN reforms, and very smartly they are phrased. This is perhaps India's work here. They have called this as the agenda for a reformed multilateralism. Stress on the word reform. And it also talks about isi idea ko, the idea is on the lines of reinvigorated, as in re-energized multilateralism. इसका मतलब क्या है? UN is already a multilateral institution. What do I mean by multilateral? Basically means there are more than one partners or two partners. There are more than two players. So think of the word bilateral, there are two players. Trilateral, there are three players. Okay, so India, US, UK could be trilateral. We can have quadrilaterals. Quad आपका है. AUKUS है. It's also a type of a multilateral. ठीक है. So when you have more than two members, called as multilateral. So I think all of you agree on this fact that the UN is already multilateral. Okay. Anybody knows the number of members here? It is 193 members. Plus और भी बहुत सारे हैं, but +2 बोलते हैं. +2 why? Because there are two countries which are non-members, but they are permanent non-members. Status of observers. They are permanent non-members and the status of observers. They don't have any right to vote, but they can attend the sessions. इसमें दो countries आते हैं. One is the Vatican City. The list of UN में they are called as the Holy See, SEE, as in देखना. Okay, as in Holy See, because Vatican City is more of a church, right? Vatican Church आपका है. One, and remember, it's also a country in its own right. And number two is Palestine. Palestine is not given the status of a proper member. They are non-members, but they are having their positions and their observers. Palestine and Vatican City. There are some debates कि यही status शायद हम कोसोवो को भी देंगे. If you know the country called Kosovo, Kosovo was carved out of Yugoslavia. Okay, carved out of Serbia. झगड़ा वगैरह हुए थे 1990s and early 200s में. Kosovo एक अलग सा country बना है. Kosovo, Macedonia, you know about Bosnia, Herzegovina, Serbia. So one country, Kosovo. इनमें बहुत सारा World War का कहानी यहीं से शुरू होता है. The roots of some of the problems of the World War. But for now, remember these two countries. Vatican City, also called as the Holy See, and Palestine. So my point here is that the UN is already multilateral, but somewhere India says the UN multilateralism has not worked. So we want to suggest a reformed multilateralism. We want to suggest reinvigorated multilateralism. Okay? Now, what is India suggesting? Is the article ke basis pe. Now see, this is one of the skills you have to learn. The skill of picking up language and phrases जो exact हैं in the articles. देखो articles से उठा रहा हूँ 4-5 words. Write down what is the agenda suggestions में. Number 1, लिखो please, write down that the UN is to be made more inclusive organization representing contemporary reality. So underline the word inclusive. Okay, अभी UN multilateral तो है, but UN inclusive नहीं है. More inclusive organization representing contemporary reality. Number 2, it says they need a structural overhaul in terms of how the organization works. There is a need for structural overhaul. जैसे आपको अभी बता देते हैं आर्टिकल के context में, United Nations में there are 5 bodies. The UN has 5 bodies. What are they? One is, write down, one is the Security Council. Okay. Number 2 is the General Assembly. Number 3 is the Economic and the Social Council. Economic and the Social Council, जिसमें कि सारे developed issues discuss होते हैं. Number 4 is the International Court of Justice. And the 5th is the Secretariat, who does all the paperwork, all the secretarial functions, the United Nations Secretariat. और ये सबको head कौन करता है? The Secretary General of the UN. Now, इसमें challenges हैं that the Secretariat is a typical, bulky, large, highly inefficient body. Typical bureaucracy है. Paperwork, red tapeism, the way they appoint the Secretary General. Elections are not representative. I mean, they're recommending that they should move towards a presidential style election for the Secretary General. Okay. वहाँ reforms चाहिए. We need reforms in terms of how the bodies coordinate. इसको बोलते हैं the structural reforms. Okay, खासकर most important is the working of the Secretariat. जिसमें कि एक टाइप का reservation system है, सोचो आप. It is very inefficient. Okay, there's lot of lobbying going on. There's lot of parochial partisan operation going on, which is not fair always. So we need a structural reforms in the UN. Then India is talking about institutional accountability. Okay, we need more inclusive, we need structural reforms, we need institutional accountability. Basically, somebody must be answerable to what's happening, what's not happening. Somebody must be held responsible for the decisions made. Okay, institution. Let's say you are all aware of the slips we had in the WHO during the pandemic. Okay, WHO कुछ कह रहा है, global leader something else, research कुछ और कह रहा है. Somebody must be answerable here. इतनी बड़ी organization called WHO, and it is faltering step after step. Okay, and to say that pandemic बहुत बड़ा था, unprecedented था, WHO भी नहीं कुछ कर पाया. Now see, this is why WHO is made, right? When we have a body like WHO or the UN, इसी moment के लिए बनाया गया है. When the world has a massive problem, somebody must intervene. And if they don't do it, somebody must be accountable. So we need institutional accountability. And the 4th agenda is that we should also have wider representation that represents the diversity of the world, not only in terms of countries, but also in terms of cultures and economies. अगर आपको पूछा जाए कि UN reform क्या चाहता है, write in 20 words. बस ये 4 point है. And you have captured the idea in very nice words, very apt, very technical words, and do mention in the words of Harsh Pant, in the words of some article by ORF, what is the agenda that India is trying to represent. अच्छा, इसका बेसिस क्या है? इसका बेसिस ये है that India believes that UN's multilateralism has actually not delivered till now. The UN's multilateralism has not delivered. There is institutional inability of the UN. There is institutional inability of the UN to lead globally on its own. To lead globally on its own. जब भी कुछ UN करता है, या तो US करा रहा होता है. Whatever UN does, maybe China is working back end like a proxy. Whatever the UN does, some countries as groups are influencing it. The UN on its own is not leading the world on issues of crisis and importance. There is an inability. It says that India's recommendation is based on UN's functional evaluation, okay, where the UN has demonstrated weak moments in UN's multilateralism. I want you to consciously appreciate हम जो vocabulary use कर रहे हैं. देखो ना कभी God willing, all goes fine, but you will be another S. Jaishankar. आपकी ही aspiration है ना, कल आप foreign minister बनेंगे, foreign secretary बनेंगे, cabinet secretary बनेंगे. Okay, you are looking at that positions. So you are grooming yourself. कोई आपको अगर drive कर रहा है ना, वही बंदा drive कर रहा है. On these vocabularies, terms are used by them. They are the one who drafting documents. तो अगर ये words आपको समझ में नहीं आ रहा है और ये words आप appreciate नहीं कर पा रहे हो, that's a loss, huge loss for you. जैसे हम बताते हैं, imagine this, that if I asked, I mean, I did try some of this. I asked कि बताओ, इस article में क्या लिखा है? The answer was UN reform करेंगे. Why? Because UN is not performing well. What can we do? We'll have a more inclusive agenda. India को add कर देते हैं, China को add कर देते हैं, इसको add कर देते हैं. Why? Because so that UN can become more effective. Now, ये तो आपने निचोड़ बता दिया. The crux you have told me, but this crux does not tell me, do you really digest and assimilate the wisdom of the article or write-up or not? It's like saying, okay, ये glass में क्या है? Glass में पानी है. There are some rock remains in the water. There are some type of calcium, potassium in the water, and it is cold because it's in the fridge. ये crux बता दिया. Actually है क्या ये? This probably is a very nice, well-made lemonade. शरबत है. आप उसको तोड़ के बता रहे हो पानी है, चीनी है, नमक है और कुछ salts हैं. Imagine somebody describing, okay, a dish given to you at, it's a dead animal, okay, जिसमें कि कुछ grass का seeds डाला हुआ है हमने. And there are some chemicals that we have taken from plants. कि किसी का जड़ी बूटी पीस के डाला हुआ है, and please eat this. Terrible, no? Start with मरा हुआ जानवर है. But you are forgetting something called as biryani यहाँ पर है. Okay, biryani is more than मरा हुआ जानवर plus the seeds of a grass called as rice. So when you are simplifying something, make sure you don't trivialize it. मेरा problem है simplification में आप trivialize कर देते हैं. ये article is worth studying and learning the way it approaches the issues. और ऐसे words का ना कोई substitutes नहीं है. ऐसे words का ना alternative ढूंढेंगे अगर, you will dilute the whole impact of the article. आप दोबारा लिख के देखना इसमें क्या impact होता है, लिखेंगे आप. I hope you got, all of you got the point here. So article को हम बोलते हैं कि don't read articles. Article में आप अध्ययन करें. Okay, don't simply participate. Go perform बोलते हैं हम. Okay, so आपको आर्टिकल पढ़ना नहीं है, आर्टिकल को घोंट पीस के assimilate करना है. So now you understand this, the basis में, I'll add. So the writer acknowledges or tries to talk about that the UN has had weak moments in its UN multilateralism. Why? Because it says look at 3 events which are happening around us और contemporary time से बात कर रहे हैं. What are 3 events? Number 1 is COVID pandemic. अब COVID pandemic में क्या हुआ? जो unfortunate है UN के लिए. What happened was borders closed down. The countries stopped collaborating. Borders closed down. Countries stopped collaborating. The supply chains were disrupted deliberately. ना हम import करें, ना export करें, लोग आ सकते हैं, ना लोग जा सकते हैं, no capital infusion. Okay, supply chains were blocked deliberately, and it was the global south that was led by India in dealing with the problem. Okay, India is the global south, right? Global south as in one of the developing countries that we have. Okay, US is shut down, Japan is shut down, China is a pariah. UK, people are dying like in hundreds and thousands. So जब UN चाहिए था, at that time, UN kind of got dysfunctional. COVID was a very big eye-opener. इतना बड़ा organization failed completely in its effort to quell the problem. That was one example of a failure. The second example of failure was the UN's multilateralism was unable to provide mechanisms to prevent wars. और इसमें तो आप हजारों वॉर की बात कर लीजिए, ना इराक वॉर रुक पाया, ना सीरियन वॉर रुक पाया है, ना अफगान वॉर रुक पाया है. The Korean problem is continuing. Okay, and the worst was now the Ukraine war. The UN has systematically failed in preventing wars. There has been a deadlock in the United Nations Security Council. Okay, and there has been a boycott of Russia. और historically हमने ईरान को भी boycott किया हुआ है, हमने North Korea को भी boycott किया हुआ है. And this boycott is not yielding anything. The sanctions हो रहे हैं. Okay, ये sanctions के consequences the local populations are facing, because when you have sanctions and boycotting North Korea, you think you're impacting the life of that Kim Jong. Kim Jong तो अपना पैलेस में बैठे हुए हैं. Okay, वो अपना अच्छे से खाना वाना पी रहे हैं, खा रहे हैं, पी रहे हैं. He has the whale of a time riding horses and photography कर रहे हैं. मर कौन रहा है? In Iran, okay, do you think the leaders are suffering? The common people are dying. Okay, the common people have problems of rations and issues. Iraq में क्या हुआ है? Is Putin suffering? Okay, is the leadership suffering? When you have sanctions, when you have got boycotts, the economy suffers, and the brunt of which is taken by the common man. So the UN has failed to prevent wars. UN has the case of the Security Council has been deadlocked, and the boycott culture is not yielding. It's almost saying that the type of veto powers that the permanent members have, the UN is becoming more and more redundant. कुछ भी हम मतलब की बात करना चाह रहे हैं, वो boycott कर देते हैं या फिर वो लगा देते हैं veto power. India has consistently tried to bring some terrorists and book them, but consistently China vetoes or Russia is vetoing. Okay, it's unfortunate. An example where the UN has not been effective, and more importantly, it says the third dimension is the एक dimension बताया COVID का problem. Second, I said not preventing wars. The third issue is the rise of China. Now, rise of China problem नहीं है. Rise of China accompanied by the Chinese belligerence and Chinese aggression. Two very powerful words. हमें किसी country के growth से थोड़ी problem है. हमें problem है country के aggression से. Country के belligerence, total disdain of the global rules and regulations and global norms. We are scared about that. और इसका history रहा है. We have seen how belligerence of Germany, what it did cost us. The belligerence of some local warlords, what it costs us. China's rise, and there is a threat that China can develop its own matrix of multilateralism that circumvents the West. China can develop its own matrix of multilateralism that can circumvent the West. मतलब क्या है कि अगर आप रिफॉर्म नहीं करोगे, इंडिया टेलिंग द पावर्स कि पूरा वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड विल बिकम इररिलेवेंट. चाइना सारा इकट्ठा कर रहा है अपना. चाइना इज बिल्डिंग रिलेशनशिप विद सेंट्रल एशिया. ओके, चाइना का बहुत ट्रेड लिंक्स बहुत स्ट्रांग है विद इटली. इटली का एक पोर्ट है कॉल्ड एज ट्रिस्टे. आई डोंट नो हाउ टू प्रोनाउंस इट. TRIESTE. The Italians have literally given that port to China now. Chinese trains are reaching Spain. Okay, China is deciding the agenda of the Southeast Asian countries. Hong Kong, look at Singapore, क्या हो रहा है? देखिए, debt trap, ओला कहानी है. तो China अपना ही grouping बना लेगा. आप बैठते रह जाना in the name of United Nations. It is in this backdrop, India says that the UN requires some kind of reforms. बना कहानी है आपका? If they ask you, why does UN reform is required? एक तो why, because कुछ agenda meet करना है. Why, because there is some context behind why the contemporary world is different from the world 50, 60, 70 years ago. By the way, I hope you know, the UN was formed in 1945, just after World War II. Okay, UN has done decently well. I not say I'll reject it. But last 20 odd years में UN stands severely challenged, खासकर with the decline of USSR, the rise of US, the Chinese issues, and so on. ये आपका background रहा. Okay. Now come third one. Objective क्या है? Objective is, now देखो ये बड़ा tricky है. आप इसको भी objective में डाल सकते हो. But you must have a method in how you're classifying content. It's like a virus. Virus can be living, non-living also. So it's up to you how you classify it. So in my classification, look at what I wrote under objectives kya tha? Number one, to address the growing stakes of the developing world. To address the growing stakes of the developing world. आज के globalized world में every country now matters. आज के globalized world में, okay, we are linked to one another. The poorest countries also now are part of this economic globalization. तो हर कंट्री का स्टेक्स है, तो उसको प्रॉपर्ली इंटीग्रेट करना है यूएन के एजेंडा के अंदर. द सेकेंड ऑब्जेक्टिव इज टू फॉस्टर ट्रस्ट एंड लीडरशिप अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड. ये मिसिंग है अभी. ओके, यूएन्स ऑब्जेक्टिव, यूएन्स रिफॉर्म ऑब्जेक्टिव इज अबाउट फॉस्टरिंग trust and leadership across the world. We need a deeper regional engagement. We have to share the burden of evolving multilateralism and the associated consequences. And we need an institution that reflects contemporary reality. Guys, my suggestion is, ये आप याद करें. Sit down and by heart these words. Okay, every word is important here. By heart the words here. ठीक है. With this, I'll suggest आप ये article दोबारा पढ़ें, and I'll show you how I read. Of course, I've taken a printout. इसका format अलग है, but have a look at how I was reading this article. ये article है A Ground Plan for India's Reformed Multilateralism by Harsh Pant. मैंने क्या किया पहले? I read the whole article once. Quickly पढ़ लिया मैंने. Then mental level पे I wanted to classify. और classification में I decided what I'll do. What's the basis? What's the recommendation? And what's the objective? And then I started numbering them. ये जो देखो ये 1, 2, 3, 4 है. Inclusive organization, structural overhaul, institutional accountability, wider representation. 1, 2, 3 and 4 points. फिर मैंने देखा कि objectives में तो मैंने ABCD कर दिया. Foster trust and leadership across the world. B, space for more inclusive UN. C, deeper regional stakes. So I use some other symbol for that. यहाँ पर D है, burden sharing. दिख रहा है आपको ये वाला words? Okay. Then what I did was, जो basis होगा, मैं इसको अलग numbering किया. Okay. UN functional evaluation है, Roman 1. COVID-19 Roman 2. इसके अंदर में 2, 3 points are here. UN-led multilateralism has been unable to provide strong mechanisms. Roman number 2. So I am classifying the write-up. Okay, China's rise, belligerence and aggression. Roman number 3. इसमें examples हैं. What it has done in South China Sea, Indo-Pacific region. The UN-style multilateralism has limitations. Number 4. China's growing dominance could lead to carve its own multilateral matrix, circumventing the West. So, जो भी पढ़ा रहा हूँ ना, I am picking up from your article itself. So, my probably innovation is the way I classify it as a story. So, आप ये खुद देखें. Okay, इसमें कुछ और terms भी हैं. I'll come to that now. कुछ नए terms हैं. What is G4? What's L69? Okay, I'll come to this now. Now, see, don't forget कि इसी पे you also had read one more article where I said India's position is that we want to believe in, remember the D's, dialogue, diplomacy, याद आ रहा है? Democracy, development. Last article discuss किया था मैंने, तो वो भी add कर दिया that the reforms suggested for UN is in consistency with what India believes is the future of the new world order. The new future is on the lines Shri Narendra Modi ji suggests, the world should be committed, or this is the time of dialogues, diplomacy, development and democracy, rather than conflicts and wars. So, अब मुझे कोई question पूछेगा कि बताओ इंडिया क्या चाहता है वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर में, ये मेरा is a ready-made answer now. Captures all aspects I want to talk about in terms of India's suggestion. you should know 4-5 things. लिख लीजिए quickly the facts में 4-5 things में. Number 1, you should know UN was formed in 1945 and remember इस टाइम में इंडिया अभी इंडिपेंडेंट नहीं हुआ है, ठीक है, 45 बना है. The UN was the logical culmination of an earlier effort which was the League of Nations. ये 1919 में बनाया गया था like an organization and it was in the backdrop of the World War I. But the interesting point of League of Nations was the US was not a part of it. US kept out because US felt it will get dragged into the world wars. It will get dragged into the global conflict. UN इसमें घुसा नहीं था. The League of Nations. अच्छा, next you should know UN को बनाने में US का काफी बड़ा हाथ रहा है, खासकर रूजवेल्ट, फ्रैंकलिन रूजवेल्ट का बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल रहा है. But Roosevelt died and the man who carried forward the effort was this man called as Harry Truman, the next prime minister, the president of the US. After FDR was the president, Roosevelt, and the effort was continued by Harry Truman. So League of Nations में US का active role नहीं था, but इसमें था. अच्छा, now in the UN के formation में we have got founder members. There are 50 founder members, 50 plus 1 बोलते हैं. Plus 1 is Poland. Poland बाद में आया. Okay, Poland came later. So 50 plus 1 founder members, and India is one of them. India is one of the founder members. अब UN का एक charter है. Charter is like a vision document, you can say. The charter that we have that has a vision, rules and regulations charter है. इसके अलावा UN का एक structure है. जो बताया मैंने आपको structure क्या है UN का? Okay, there are 5 bodies. Okay, the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Economic and the Social Council, the International Court of Justice, and we have the Secretariat. Remember this. अच्छा. Objectives of UN क्या है? Okay, number 1 is to maintain peace and security in the world. Number 2, to develop friendly relationships between nations. Number 4, to uphold human rights. And number 5 is to collaborate for economic and social development. और इसी के तहत a very important document of the UN is what's called as the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, which is a list of Sustainable Development Goals. इसका objective ये भी था that never in the future can we allow for another catastrophe like the world wars. So conflict नहीं होना चाहिए, no fight, no wars. So remember, whatever reforms we're suggesting is backdrop में है. The backdrop is कुछ agenda था, कुछ objectives थे हमारे जो meet नहीं हो रहे हैं. So India says we need reforms. एक और fact जान लो that the Security Council का 2 part है. एक है permanent members और एक है non-permanent members who are part of the Security Council. Permanent में 5 of them are there. Okay, कौन-कौन है 5? The US, the UK, the Russia, okay, China and France. UK, France. UK is Britain and France. ये permanent है. Okay, Japan नहीं है, Germany नहीं है. Though they are powerful because it's a World War II का legacy है ना. ये तो हम कह रहे हैं that UN is still representing the legacy of the world wars. Okay, Central Powers, Axis Powers, Allied Powers. These are the legacy of the world wars. Okay, you can't have a important world grouping जिसमें Japan नहीं है यार in the Security Council. Okay, very powerful country. उसके बाद okay, India. Now आज देखो India is a huge economy, right? Top 5 में आ गया India. We're rising up the order. Okay, India, countries like Brazil, like South Africa, like Nigeria. These are very powerful countries today in terms of economy and the future prospects. So permanent members of the Security Council में India नहीं है, okay, Japan नहीं है, Brazil नहीं है, okay, Germany नहीं है, because it represents the legacy of the 40s and the 50s. और non-permanent members जो होते हैं 10 होते हैं, again they're elected for what 2 years. So India अभी member है as this one, but it rotates. India says not happy with this. It is not representative of the present political and economic reality. ये आपको facts पता होना चाहिए. अब एक और debate होता है कि India, okay, एक allegation है somewhere that India had a chance to enter the Security Council as a permanent member, maybe Nehru was not wise in accepting it. ये बहुत बड़ा एक debate रहा है कि acquisitions, counter acquisitions रहे हैं. Australia भी नहीं है in the permanent Security Council member. You're right. A very powerful nation again. So that's about the article and some background. एक question है कि आप इसमें सोचें, लिखें ना लिखें, your choice. लिखें अच्छी बात है. Our team will review it. 250 words is what UPSC says. आप क्या बोलते हो कितना लिखना चाहिए? Don't write 250 words, please. Okay, because you can't maintain the time then. Generally write within 200 words. 200 words का मतलब है 2.5-3 पेज काफी होता है. Okay, 250 वर्ड जाएंगे आप फंस जाएंगे. The question is, how far do you agree that the UNSC, United Nations Security Council as a body, does not reflect the new realities of 21st century? United Nations Security Council as a body does not reflect the new realities of 21st century. Suggest some reforms in UNSC to synchronize it to the contemporary needs. Suggest some reforms in UNSC to synchronize it to the contemporary needs. एक और क्वेश्चन आपके लिए है, multiple choice question है. Who among the following countries are not a member of L69 group? Okay, are or is, whatever. दो भी हो सकते हैं इसमें. Is not a member of L69 group. हमने choice में दिया हुआ है India, China, Brazil, South Africa. हम आपको choice नहीं दे रहे हैं, आप बताइए. Is it 2 of them? Is it 3 of them? Is it 1 of them? Now, ऐसे questions में the fact is 69 countries आप जान नहीं सकते हैं. लेकिन अगर पता है कि L69 क्या चीज है, then you can tell who can't be a member of that. ठीक है? Bye bye. Bye bye.